Hi, Veronica. How are you doing?
I'm good, Ben. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, and a very hot day in the UK. Um, Guys, we're having an interview with Veronica, who's currently in Peru. What time is it with you right now? It's early in the morning, right?
Yeah, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, which is good because I have my first class at 9 o'clock today, so it all
Okay.
works out.
Oh, that's perfect. So yeah, you're starting right from the get-go. So perfect. Well, thank you very much for making yourself available early in the morning. I don't know if I would be quite so brave early in the morning, but appreciate it nevertheless. So for those of you who are watching the TEFL Heaven review interview rather for the first time, my name is Ben Hesketh, and I'm one of the TEFL Heaven team. So, Veronica, people are really interested to know about life in Peru and what it's like. It's a little bit of a location that's a little bit more off the beaten track, I think. And so I think a lot of people will be quite excited to hear about your experience so far. But I just really wanted to kick off by asking you, when you set out on this TEFL adventure, what did you look to achieve? What was your personal goal to have or to take away from this experience?
Well, I was just finishing graduate school and I was studying Inca history. And so Cusco just seemed like the logical next place to live because it was the Inca capital. And I really wanted to improve my Spanish. I wanted to be a better teacher also. And I wanted to live abroad in Latin America, specifically Peru, and experience the culture and make friends here and just explore because it's so different than Ohio, where I'm from. And it just seemed like the logical next thing, like, well, I have to check this out. and
Yeah, perfect. So as far as having those goals of like improving your Spanish and becoming a better teacher, you've been out there in the country for nearly 10 months now since the course. How do you feel like those things have come on?
I think they've come on very well. What I've learned about Peruvian Spanish, which is very nice, is that people tend to speak very slowly. Also, there's a huge international community here, and so a lot of people in Peru are very motivated to work with tourists. And so they're very good at speaking with tourists, and a lot of people are very patient with my Spanish. So it's gotten better. Definitely, I still have a lot to learn. I can have meaningful conversations with my friends here in Spanish now, which is really great. But always, especially when it comes to slang or really bizarre vocabulary, like I went ziplining with my friend and with a small little company, and everybody only spoke Spanish. And I'd been studying it for a while, but I learned that like my ziplining vocabulary, like about the harnesses and the suit, was not there. So I was like, what?
Right. Okay. So
but
yeah.
it's
Sorry, go
been
on.
great and it's improved a lot. And also, more importantly, I've improved as a teacher, which is good. I've had a lot of I work for a school and we teach mostly private classes, but some group classes too for bigger companies in Cusco. And both of those different experiences have challenged me in different ways, but it's very rewarding.
Yeah, that's great. So do you feel like you feel like you're having an impact where you are?
Yeah, I feel like I'm contributing to the community in a positive way, and I like that. And I love my students.
Yeah, that's great. I think one of the wonderful things about teaching English as a foreign language is that you get to leave a very definite legacy in the world, because you've taught English to those people. Hopefully they'll always remember it, and so you give them that opportunity to better themselves, and that's a real legacy that you can leave. So that's perfect. So tell us a little bit about your TEFL training then, because you trained in August of 2016. It's the 4-week course. A lot of people kind of want to know what's it actually like to be on the course, and what do you do from week 1 to week 4?
hmm All right, let me think. That was a long time ago for me.
Yeah, I
Um,
bet lots happen.
so when I first started the TEFL course, I was quite nervous because I'd been in the country a week or so and I didn't know what to expect, but the TEFL course was actually, it was really good. It was wonderful. And it was a 4-week course. And on week 1, I remember we focused on, it was an introductory section to the course. So a lot of the course was us in the class getting to know each other. And we did a lot of like group work together. And we did an introduction to classroom management techniques. And it was really good because it was hard work. So the class, I think every day was 8 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
But it was so much fun. We had a really great TEFL trainer. Her name was Claudia. We called her Mama Clow Clow. And she was so great because a lot of the course was us working. It was a lot of hard work. It was very intensive. But at the same time, we had long sessions where we just talked to each other, or sometimes to relieve, like, I remember one time everybody was working really hard and our TEFL trainer started throwing marshmallows at us and then gave us marshmallows and we had a marshmallow fight.
Awesome.
Like, so it's fun. Like, it's hard work, definitely. Week 1, we did mostly introduction and to each other, classroom management techniques. Week 2 and 3 were really intense on grammar. And week 4, we learned a lot about how to really evaluate students in their English, in their speaking, in their writing, in their reading abilities, in their comprehension, and how to improve all of those, also to help our students study for different kinds of tests. And it was difficult, but definitely really useful as a TEFL teacher now, because we learned really good techniques about how to teach English in English, which is really what you're supposed to do. And if you do it correctly, I've seen it work really well for the students. I've seen my students improve so much. And so I agree with the techniques I've learned. I like the teacher a lot. I like the class atmosphere. I made some really good friends in the class. And one of my friends from the class, she's still in Peru with me. We still hang out all of the time and we talk about our lives. We go on trips together and we also bounce around ideas about teaching and the TEFL course and how to use the ideas. So it's still a big part of my life 10 months later.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's really helpful when you have other people who are going through the same experience. And like you said, you can bounce ideas off each other because you have different circumstances that present themselves in the classroom and you learn different things than, you know, your friends or your colleagues. And so being able to share that information is really helpful for everyone in terms of that, you know, improvement. So, so that's great.
And, And I wanted to say too, you get practice, like practical classroom practice in the TEFL course. Once a week you teach one mini lesson, that's 20 minutes, and then your final week of the TEFL course, every day you teach an hour-long class, and that's really good too. So you don't come out of there with no practical training. You come out there with a lot of theory, we read some articles, but also practical classroom, like hands-on training.
Yeah. How did you find that practical teaching? Because a lot of people, from my experience of being on the courses, they will make some real basic mistakes or just things that they're more oversights until you actually have those students in front of you who, you know, sometimes don't really understand a lot of English or the English is very basic. And then you realize that perhaps you're using too much vocab to try and explain something and they're just not getting it. And so how did that sort of first practical session sort of impact your progression through the course?
I was really nervous because you're being watched, and I did okay. Definitely I've improved as a teacher since then. But I remember I definitely made some mistakes, like when somebody wasn't getting something, and I knew that my trainer was watching me, I got a little nervous and was like, "Oh no." And then I would explain a little too much, and now I just, when somebody doesn't get something, I relax, maybe think for a second of a new way to approach it. Because a
Yeah.
big thing that we do is we don't explain things in English. Um, what we do is usually we try to act something out. We draw it on the board. Or we try to give them like an exercise for filling in the blank that helps them really get the information, because when you explain too much, it can really confuse the student.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's right. Using too much vocab is normally the sort of pretty basic mistakes that most people make, and that's why it's so useful to have that experience, because you all of a sudden you go, oh, okay, they're not understanding it. I have to really go very, very basic, and like you said, there's that huge emphasis on non-verbal communication, whether it's acting it out, drawing a picture, or taking something that they already know and understand, and then using it to help them to understand what you're trying to explain to them. So that's great. And so in 10 months of being in Peru, one of the questions that people often ask, people often have a lot of concerns, like, you read stuff on the internet. I mean, it seems like you had a bit of study before you came to Peru, so you kind of knew a lot about the country through that. But for a lot of people, they'll read things on the internet, or they'll hear various things and hearsay, and they kind of conjure up these concerns, because their parents say or something. Did you have some concerns before you came to Peru, and did you find that some of them were founded, some of them were unfounded, maybe some things you didn't think of, or how is the preparation kind of compared with the reality?
I did have, mostly, I'm going to be honest, mostly I was just really excited.
Yeah.
I wanted to see some ink architecture and practice my Spanish and teach, but I had some concerns. I was a little concerned about money, honestly, before
Yeah.
coming here. I had worked before I came to Peru, and that really helped. So I had some saved up, but all over different websites kind of had different ideas about what you got paid. I read some different blogs and on the average pay in Peru. And as an American, it was hard for me to understand how the standard of living is different, or the average salary is a lot different than in the U.S. For example, I live in a really lovely little house right now with 2 roommates, and I pay 450 soles a month. So that's about a little less than $200 a month, and that's considered good. And that was really surprising for me, because I was worried about, like, seeing the average salary in Peru is about, for a TEFL teacher with the TEFL, it's between, I would say, between about, the range that I've gotten, I'm trying to think, is between like 1,000 soles and 1,400 soles.
Right.
So that's
Okay.
between about 200 US dollars, or about, at the most, here, I'm going to look it up real quick. 1,400 soles.
You go for it.
Yeah.
I always jump on XE all the time.
1,400 soles in dollars. Hmm. Okay, so that's about 428 American dollars. Sorry, I wanted to look that up to be precise.
Yeah.
I knew it was in that area, and in Peru, that's more than enough to live comfortably, I can say. I pay my rent, I go out with my friends on the weekends, I travel, and I go out to eat, or I buy food sometimes, I go grocery shopping, pay the extra bills when I need to. And it's definitely enough to live comfortably. But seeing that from the United States, I didn't understand that. So
Yeah.
it made me nervous, but I decided I'm going to go here. I'm going to figure it out as I go. A lot of people come to Peru and seem to make a life for themselves here. So it's just kind of something you have to understand when you get here. But I would recommend before coming to Peru, if you have obligations in the United States, for example, maybe paying off university loans, it's good
Yes.
to have a little extra saved up because what I make, the average salary here is more than enough for me to live comfortably. But I think with other obligations, it would be a lot more difficult. So I worked for a while in grad school. I was a teacher in school. I was a waitress. I saved a lot of money there, and now I use that extra money sometimes for the obligations in the United States to help with my student loans a little bit. And that's
Yes.
really my advice is you don't have to worry about, I don't think, having money saved up to live here, but you might if you have other things to pay off in the States, as young people just out of college often do. I know I
Yes.
did. But the salary here is good. I found a really nice apartment. I buy my groceries easily. I get the things that I want. And the salary here is definitely, it's not a concern.
Yeah, that's great. And that's really good to know because, as you said, that is probably most people's concerns. It's normally that, accommodation, and a few other things. But and that's really good advice because a lot of people also ask about, in fact, maybe you can give us a bit of insight into this, actually, because a lot of people ask us, so if I'm moving to a foreign country, I'm going to go teach, in Peru, and I have my student loans back home, do you still continue paying those whilst you're away? Because you do, right?
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah.
I Yeah, I still continue paying my student loans. How I do it right now is I use a little bit of my Peruvian money and I use a little bit of money that I've saved up, and little by little it's going down. But I'm also on an income-based plan that I was allowed to do with my school, which
That's
means that, yeah, it is good. So for now, I actually don't have to pay a lot of money. Every month I can pay pretty well within my means and nothing is dropping drastically. And I try to save a little bit of money each month. So that really helps. And something that lasts for me until about December. And then they'll ask me about renewing my plan, and I don't know if I'll have that option anymore, so I might have to pay more money and figure that out. And I haven't figured that one out quite yet. But for now, I'm on a really good payment plan.
Oh, that's great. That's really good to hear, and good for others to know as well that it's possible to be able to do that, because that is a concern for a lot of people. Finances always are. So another thing that I guess that sort of South America gets wrapped with a little bit is people are concerned, is it a safe place? People often ask us, is it safe? And people's parents ask, is it safe? What's been your experience, as a female over there? Have you felt safe, or has there been times when you haven't?
In Cusco, I felt very safe. Um, it's safer. I think it's actually a little safer than the city where I come from.
Really?
Yeah, one of the biggest issues in Cusco is petty theft. So
Right.
you always have to keep your backpacks close, your purse close. Um, I one time lost my backpack on a bus, and that was really a bummer. But luckily, there was only English books in it, so the thief will just learn some English,
I was
I
going to
guess.
say, you helped somebody then.
Yeah, so that wasn't too bad. But Peru, every once in a while, I think something that's interesting to note is about every 4 months or so, there's a protest day. And usually the protests are very organized. You can go on the forum online. There's a forum for that, and where the protests are announced, and sometimes 2 months in advance. And when protest day comes, it's very impressive because after 2 months of recruiting people, they have so much support. And the protests are for different issues, usually involving transportation, maybe the rise in prices, There was recently one over corruption with a new airport that was going to be built and then it wasn't.
Right.
And if you don't read the forums and protest day just kind of comes on you, it can be a little overwhelming. Like, transportation is closed down. People all over the city are wearing signs and shouting. And it took me a while to realize kind of the culture or the process of how these are organized.
Yeah.
And until then, like, whenever that would happen, I would get really nervous. Also, at that point, my Spanish wasn't very good, so it was kind of hard for me to understand sometimes what they were protesting about, because the issues get pretty complex. Um, actually, just a few weeks ago, there was a protest day, but it was with these university students, and they were protesting because the bus prices raised from 70 cents to 80 cents, which may not seem like much, but to a lot of people here, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Especially if you take the buses every day, and somebody who doesn't have a lot of money has to take the buses constantly. It adds up. But the
Yeah.
university students who were protesting, they were a little aggressive. I teach in elementary school on Mondays and Fridays, and I was taking the bus to the school, and the protesters swarmed the bus, and then they started graffitiing the windows, and they made everything like black, and they ordered everybody out of the bus, and then they went on the bus and started putting graffiti and 70 cents all over it. And I think, that was just a few weeks ago, but that was the only time in Peru or where I ever felt like afraid or unsafe or really confused. Because even though I had read the forum, I was prepared for this. I had never seen them until that moment be that aggressive. Usually the protests are very peaceful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was my scariest moment in Peru.
Do you think it was because it was the young people? Do you think they weren't as seasoned as the older protesters and they kind of went a little bit too far?
I think that's possible, yes. Because there was actually another protest that day over the airport, over the cancellation of construction of an airport in Chinchero. And the airport protesters were the ones who planned a protest far in advance, and the student protesters did it all of a sudden. And the airport protesters did not like it because they had planned their protest for a long time. And here are these punk students coming in, confusing people with what protest is what. And I agree with them. I think that's pretty unfair to the airport protesters because their protest was very strong too. It had a lot of support. Transportation around the airport was a little difficult, but at the same time, it was peaceful. People held signs and they blocked certain areas, but they didn't damage property. They didn't hurt people, where the university students were the ones who were getting all the attention. And honestly, I think the airport issue too was a little more indicative of corruption. But
So
it was interesting. That was an interesting day.
yeah, I bet, because it is interesting because these protests are organised. Is there, the fact that these younger people kind of cause damage because it is a protest? Is there that there's going to be some sort of collateral damage? Is it just accepted well, or is there sort of are the young for what they did? Do you think there'll be some sort of will they be in trouble for that?
I think they will. When the bus incident happened with me, I saw a lot of ladies like automatically calling the police, and I think they will get. I think that they got in trouble. I honestly didn't stay. I just wanted to get out of that area, so I didn't stick around to see. Yeah, but I did notice that a lot of people were calling the police. So, I think that they just had such a presence that it was probably hard to control them all. I'm sure a lot of them didn't get in trouble, but I'm sure some of them at least did.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like there's, I mean, having organized protest is a little bit like, in my mind, because of the way that we see protests, certainly in the UK, it seems like it's a little bit of organized chaos, but in a good way, because it's
Yeah.
good that people get an opportunity to have their voices heard, that's the way it should be. And so, yeah, so it sounds like in most cases, it's actually a very positive thing.
Yeah, I think so, because something I've realized here is that a lot of people are very passionate about social issues in Peru, and it's a wonderful country, but like any country or any government, there are a lot of issues, like especially with access to water. And there's a lot of debate in Peru of who has water and who deserves water and that sort of thing, because it's a limited resource here. For example, for about 6 hours in a 24-hour period, I don't have water in my house, but it doesn't bother me because I usually work during the day. I have it in the morning, I have it at night, and then at about 11 o'clock at night, from 11 to 1, it closes, and
Right.
usually from like 2 to 5, it closes. So to me, that's okay. That's not a huge deal.
Can
But
you pour out water when you do get it? Can you sort of like store it a little bit, or can you purchase water easily?
yeah, you can purchase water easily. I personally try not to do that because recycling isn't very common here.
Right.
Because I know a lot of people who would like to recycle more, but it's just that the government overall is focused on other issues, and recycling just isn't a priority. So I try not to buy too many water bottles. What I do is I have my own refillable, and you have to boil the water here before you drink it.
Yeah.
So I boil water in the morning, and I take the water with me. You can also leave the water in the boiler, and then you have water all day for tea, or it'll cool down for water if you really want some when the water isn't working. And at first, actually, something like that really threw me off. I always forgot to boil my water, and then I was like, no, I don't have it. But it's just something you get used to. It's a really,
I guess.
Yeah, like it's a part of my life now that I don't even think twice about.
Yeah, that's great. So, so you mentioned a moment ago about teaching in an elementary school on a Monday and a Friday, and give us a little bit more insight in terms of your teaching and the teaching that you do, and I guess from a normal week from your perspective.
Okay, well, I work at a really nice little school right off the Plaza de San Francisco, and usually we do private lessons. That's what we're really good at. But we also do group lessons with bigger classes. And for me, every day is different because it depends on my students. There's a culture of lateness here in Peru. So a lot of times, 2 minutes before my class, my students will say, "Teacher, I'm canceling." And I say, "Come on, man." But every day is different because we do very flexible schedules. So my schedule depends on my student schedule. I have them all on WhatsApp, and we talk a lot. And I make sure that I can do schedules that are good with them, because a lot of my private students, and the private students I teach Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, they have very busy lives. They have stressful jobs or long jobs. They have children. And so I need to work with them. Sometimes even I go to their houses. So I've gotten to know Cusco and different parts really well because I bus all around the city. I go do my delivery English classes sometimes. And it's fun. Sometimes it's a little difficult because it's hard for me to plan my weeks ahead of time because my students need to come first. So I can't always be sure if I'm teaching maybe in the afternoon next week, or if I'm teaching late on Friday or early on Friday. And it can be hard to make plans in advance, but I think it's worth it overall because it's a good job. It's a really small school that I teach at, with 3 English teachers. We're all very tight knit, and I adore my students. They're so
Yeah.
interesting. Every student is different. They're all trying to improve their English, but for very different reasons. Like one of them, her name's Shayla. She's moving to the United States in 3 months to be a nanny. And other students, a lot of them work at hotels, a lot of them work in the tourist industry. So that's really fun for me because we practice talking about vocabulary related to Inca tourism, and I learn so much from my students with our conversations.
Yeah.
And most private classes are, we do grammar, of course, but most private classes are conversation based. A lot of
Yes.
my students are advanced, and a few of them, 2 of them, are even fluent. And they want to take the English classes because they want to be exposed to not just the grammar, but how people actually talk. So
Yes.
they like to know the idioms and the phrases and the slang, and that's really fun to teach students. And then on Mondays and Fridays, I teach at the elementary school. It's called GAL, Global Active Learning, and that's interesting. I teach, it's a bilingual school. So some classes are in English, some are in Spanish. And I teach the art classes, so I'm the art teacher there. And I teach the art classes in English. And it's definitely good. It's also been very challenging at times because it's a big class with 20 students or so in each class.
Yeah.
And all different levels of English in one class. There are kids who have parents from the United States or Great Britain or South Africa and they're fluent in English. And then there are children who just transferred who don't know English all of that well. And it's really been a challenge to accommodate all of them. But I usually speak in a way that all of my students can understand. And then I've learned that I put higher expectations on other students in the class. And I'm still I'm still learning with that too.
Cool.
Because every day is different. There's a lot of new challenges, but I will say that the school is a really great school and that I've learned a lot about how to work with kids. It's tested my patience a lot. But at the same time, some of the kids are really awesome. Like, I go out during recess always and I help monitor them, or I go on field trips with the kids, or I play with them, and like they love when I practice Spanish with them because it's a break from them, like not speaking English in class, and they like to talk to me in Spanish and correct me all the time because that's what I do to them
Yeah.
in our downtime, which I think is really funny. It's
Yeah.
like, I know what you're doing. You just had
Yeah.
2 hours of me saying no, 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 uh-oh. And now they just want to do it to me over
Yeah.
recess. So it's
De-
funny. They came up to me and talked to me at recess and they say only Spanish. And I'm like, okay.
that's great. It sounds like you have a lot of fun with your students then. It seems like you're very well integrated.
I love my students. I really do. They're, especially the kids, they can definitely be difficult sometimes. But like at the end of the day, they're really cute. And something you have to remember about kids and adults is that they learn differently. My adult students are so motivated to learn and so passionate about improving their English for their jobs or for themselves, or some of them want to move to an English speaking country. Kids, not so much. They're
Yeah.
not intrinsically motivated to learn. So class always has to be fun and interesting. There needs to be games because they're kids. You can't
So,
expect them. You have to lower your expectations for what they want because their parents force them to do this. So the best I can do is I can make it fun for them so they feel like they're not learning.
Yeah, that's what it should. I think when you're working with the younger ones, it's always about disguising the learning in terms of, like you say, games and activities, and just making it fun so that they want to do it. Because at the end of the day, the more engaged they are, the more you're going to be able to teach them during that time. If they're bored and they're despondent, then it's a waste of everyone's time, really. So, and you end up having loads of fun as well as a byproduct, don't?
Yeah, of course. Like yesterday, actually. The kids are making their own menus and designing them for a restaurant that they want to open. And then we're going to we're all going to make like our own little stations with the restaurants, with food and everything. And this one group, their menu was so funny. Like, for their breakfast, it said the option was bananas and a banana hot dog and beer. And then, like, for lunch, it was something crazy too. It was like pigeon eggs and Smurfs.
Yeah.
And, like, it was just so funny. Like, it made me so happy to be at my job and doing this, because kids are actually hilarious when you give them a chance or they feel comfortable expressing themselves.
Yeah, that's right, and that's great, and that is so much fun as a teacher. It's really lovely when you have students in that position and they can really just communicate with you freely and kind of. And that's the joy. So you're a teacher, Monday to Friday. What do you get up to on the weekends?
On the weekends, it depends. Sometimes, because it takes a little bit more money to travel, but sometimes I like to travel on the weekends because that's one of the reasons I came here. So I like to visit Inca ruins. I visited Machu Picchu twice. It's quite a process to go, but if you're in Peru, you have to, because it's gorgeous. But also, too, there's other ruins around here that are really close and really interesting for me to visit and study, like Sacsayhuaman, which was another Inca fortress that's just a little hike up the hill from my house, really. Tambo Mache, another old Inca aqueduct, is really cool to visit. There's a lot of really good hikes, too, just in the city that you can do. Rainbow Mountain is another thing that people should visit when they're here. It's a big multicolored mountain, and it's so difficult. It gets up to 17,000 feet, which is really high up. But it's so beautiful, and there's like it's so ridiculously Peruvian. Like there's wild llamas running around, and a little village you pass through, and the Andes are gorgeous. Like, there's no other word for it. Like, sometimes still, I've been here for 10 months, and I pass, like, on this really pretty view up top from my way to work, and it still hits me like, I live here. And so there's a lot of, like, beauty and hiking that the mountains offer right around here. Lately, I've been getting into cooking, so a couple of friends and I, usually on Saturday or Sunday, we try to cook a Peruvian dish together and make it really nice.
That's fun.
And then maybe have people, it's great. We have like people over and to try our dish. And that's really good because Peruvian food's really good. Like, I think actually recently it's gotten more of a global presence, but it's a lot of rice and potatoes and eggs and meats and just different things mixed together.
Yeah.
For example, like lomo saltado is really good. It's like a stir fry. Or papa rellena is really good. It's like a deep fried mashed potato ball with meats and cheeses and vegetables inside. So that's really good.
That sounds really nice.
So good. I love the food here. So, usually, sometimes I travel around Cusco or Peru. There's a lot of different cities to see in Peru because Peru is a unique country in that it has a lot of different environments. Like where I live, I'm in the mountains. It also has a desert. So I visited Nazca and explored that one weekend. It also has the coast if you want to go to Lima. It has the coast, the desert, the mountains, the jungle, which I haven't visited yet, but I I'm going to, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. So it sounds like even though you've done quite a lot, you still have quite a lot to do, and there's plenty to get up to on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
So I've only got 2 questions that I want to cover before we wrap things up. So, I
Okay.
mean, it seems like you've been on quite a journey, from the beginning to where you are now. How do you feel that this TEFL journey has impacted you as a person?
Oh, that's a tough question. Um, in a lot of ways. I mean, I think in a way I've always been the kind of person who new things and experience because that's how I was raised. But even so, I never expected some of the challenges that I'd face in Peru. Like I thought dealing with kids would be like fun and happy and like kind of relaxed all of the time, but it's actually really difficult. Like um I've learned to deal with issues that you see in grade school. Like I talk to kids who are bullied. Like I take kids to the counselors and we talk to them. Like that sort of thing I never really thought about dealing with, and I think it's really helped me as a teacher and as a person to get a lot of insight on what children go through in elementary school. And so with my children, that's really helped me grow because it's really helped me see from an adult perspective how frustrating or difficult school can be. And then on top of that, the kids are learning in another language. And I've gotten to a point with a lot of my students where where they can express themselves, or they can come to me with problems, and I can do what I can to help them. And for me, that's really rewarding. Like I never expected those challenges, but I never expected the opportunity to help children that way.
Yeah.
And up until that point, I've always taught adults. So I think about maybe I should teach children one day. Maybe I'd be good at that. Like I like it, despite all of the challenges. Also, it's helped me grow, learning so many ways. I guess also too, like um, the Spanish language is a lot different than English. Like not just grammatically how it's set up, but if this makes sense, I can express myself differently in Spanish than in English. Like,
Of course, yeah, that's right.
yeah, like in Spanish, I love it because people speak in the passive voice a lot. So it's like the book is lost, the pen dropped. And I just think that's so interesting because in English, I feel like I take more responsibility for everything. Like, I did this, he did this, she did this. And in Spanish, it kind of goes with the more relaxed, I think, culture. It's very okay to be late here, where things are just kind of like, oh, this happened. I don't know why. And I
Yeah,
kind of
that's
like
nice.
that. It helps relax me a little bit too.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't really know that about Spanish, even though I have a very basic understanding of Spanish. I did do it at school, but it's really interesting to get that insight. And yeah, I can imagine that it does have an impact on how you feel when when you communicate in the. Um, Nice question I want to ask you then. Just tell me if you have any advice for anyone who's considering coming to Peru or thinking about taking this adventure. What advice would you give them?
I would advise them to definitely take this adventure. People here, my friends from Peru and my friends from around the world are so friendly. There's a lot of really good teaching opportunities too, actually. I think there's like 5 English schools, that really do a lot of good work in Peru. So there's a lot of opportunity. The people here are very friendly. The Peruvian people too. Also, like people here tend to be very patient with Spanish if you're nervous about that like I was. Um, yeah, definitely come here. There's so much to see. Inca architecture is like such a mystery still. It's so astounding. It's so gorgeous. And there's a lot to do in Peru. And the little things like with the water and the the infrastructure, you get used to it. You get used to it so fast. You just get into a routine and all is good. You should definitely come here. It's amazing. I've been here for 10 months. I'm going to stay for a while longer, at least until December, maybe longer.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like it's an experience that's had a big impact on you, which is great, because for me personally, I'm an advocate for people doing this just because of the personal progress. It enlarges the soul from a different perspective when you're living in a foreign country. So, but it's great that you've had such a brilliant time. Well, Veronica, thank you so much for giving us your time this morning, and I appreciate you've got a lesson starting in just over an hour, so we'll let you get to that. But thank you so much for giving us your time and your insight into life in Peru, and helping those who are going to watch this video to understand what it's really going to be like to be in the country. So thank you very much, and we shall be in touch again soon, and we shall catch you again further down the road.
Okay, thank you so much, Ben. I really enjoyed doing this.
Yeah, it's been good fun. So thank you very much. Well, I hope you have a great day, Veronica. And I shall catch you soon.
Okay, bye. Ciao.
Ciao.